Wow.
Hello, everybody. How we doing? Thank you for joining. I'm Brent Montgomery. I'm the CEO of a company called Wheelhouse, which in investment circles is more known for parties that we throw than business, but that's okay. We've got to get our start. Our operating business focuses on sports, entertainment, and investing, and we work across all the major platforms creating content. Probably do 20 to 25 TVs and films this year, and I got a call from our good friends Ron and Caitlin and Diana from iConnections to put together a little panel. I didn't read the part where they said, pick out a moderator, so I'm gonna be doing both duties today. Today's panel is gonna be focused on allocating capital in the creator economy. We'll heavily focus on sports, music, and entertainment. And when I was asked to put it together, I thought, all right, let's go get somebody who I love and respect on the investment side, Pam Chan. We'll get into Pam's background. And then it's always fun to have a creative, an artist, somebody that's used to being in front of an audience, much more so than the two people on Ja's right and left side. But Ja Rule has been a New York staple for just about his entire life, but certainly the last 25 years or so.
Sure.
I think one of the buzzwords that you'll hear today is gatekeepers. And as I'm sure everybody in this room consumes quite a bit of entertainment, music, and sports, historically it's been on the entertainment side, the studios, on the music side, the labels, and on the sports side, the ownership of the teams and leagues has really sort of prevented the athletes from having a more direct audience with their fans. But that has all been sort of blown up as we've seen in the last few years, which is exciting, scary, and is going to create a ton of investment opportunity, which is where we'll focus a lot of this time. We will start with Pam Chan. Pam is currently building out a very cool platform that you'll hear more about called Mosaic. She's at Legato, which maybe not a household name, but many of its investments and what they own are. And I liked what Pam said about her thesis and focus: a flexible private market investment strategy, pursuing the weird and wonderful.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get into the weird and wonderful. And then Ja Rule, as I mentioned, probably doesn't need a whole lot of introduction, but has been a multi-platform rapper, actor, entrepreneur, and reality star, and is New York City born and bred. Helped define an era of hip hop and R&B. Has launched several business ventures. We were just talking about his whiskey outside, which is female friendly, he was saying, and he continues.
I wish we had.
He continues to evolve as a creator and investor. He's very much lived through the gatekeeping, which he was fortunate enough to break right through and blow the top off. And now he's going to give you some thoughts on where he sees music today and how fun he sees it for everybody along that food chain. So we'll actually start with Pam. All right. So Pam, if you wouldn't mind just by starting with a bit about Legato, sure, and then diving into Mosaic, yeah, and maybe dovetail it into a little bit of how this conversation comes into your day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Brent, for having me. I'm honored to be on the same stage as Ja Rule, which I don't think will ever happen again.
Come on, Pam. Come on.
Just a little whiskey.
So insofar as introduction, so Legato was founded in 23, and as Brent mentioned, the name is probably not yet a household name. We're a $7 billion asset manager wholly owned by Exor, which is controlled by the Agnelli family. So they have other portfolio companies that you will all know and hopefully love, Ferrari being probably the most notable of them. And the vision behind Legato was to create a home for investors to invest with the mind's eye that strategies like Mosaic that don't necessarily scale to huge amounts of AUM, but are really deep conviction, and hence like my weird and wonderful fits in that home for investors to invest. And sometimes, by the way, when you say you do the weird and wonderful, you just get weird. So I'm hoping both weird and wonderful, not just weird, as we go. And so we are invested in private market strategies, very theme driven. And so one of the things we've been spending a lot of time on is creators and the creative economy, and how we think about intellectual property and all the things, whether it's AI tools to generate more content creation, but how do we invest behind all of that if you look at kind of the proportion and the value attributed to intangibles versus hard assets.
And you're the CIO and the founding partner of Mosaic, correct? So I think that speaks to sort of the newness of this as a category and becoming more professionalized. What's that been like, I think, you know, from you know, saddling both, whether you're an LP or an allocator, how are you seeing this sort of as an asset class?
So I think a couple of things. One is it's changing so fast, right? So even if you look at 2020, ad spend, just taking creator economy, YouTube, which Brent, you and I talk about a lot, it's gone from 52 billion to 116 billion in 2024, right? And it's a huge growth rate, right? You also have kind of the inflection in traditional media space that has created room for kind of this disruptive creator economy. And ultimately, when I look at it, and you and I didn't get a chance to talk back there, but I was invested in music 12 years ago, and I see a lot of analogs to some of the inflections that music as another genre of content went through with creator economy. And so when I look at it, I think there's an analog between what we've seen in some of these other spaces and content creator economy as we go.
I think when you're outside of sports and entertainment, music, you know, you might lump them together to a degree, but music was sort of well ahead. It's almost always ahead of setting culture and trends, and certainly got hit with Napster and got, you know, really upended long before YouTube is finally really having some of that same knock-on effect. And I think in the world of entertainment, you know, we were used to going to Netflix directly, going to Bravo and pitching these shows, and then having them tell us as the gatekeeper who they think was going to pop and make you know, really good show that would connect with fans. And we've certainly seen sports getting more professionalized as an asset class and more sophisticated money coming in. But with music, I think, Ja, it would be great to kind of go back to how hard it was and what it meant for you as an emerging artist to get signed, to break, to be a part of, you know, beyond, you know, so many stages, playing in front of huge audiences, and it didn't happen overnight, right? It took time, effort, and energy.
Yeah, I mean, we just talking about it outside, you know, I come from a different era when it was, you know, it was a lot different in the way you had to present yourself, you know, in the music industry, the way you had to get signed in the music industry. It was really, you had to get out and get in front of the producers, get in front of the label heads, you know, and it was really an honor back in the days to be signed to a label. You know, it felt like you were chosen, you know, by these so-called professionals, you know. So it was an amazing time. Fast forward to now, when artists can kind of just put out music whenever they want. It's a very different time, and I think both are necessary to keep the music industry alive. And we talk about gatekeeping, you know, like the thing we talked about, you know, a little while ago was when you were chosen, it kind of felt like you were getting the best of the artists that were out there to be chosen. But then you also lose the fact that everybody can't be chosen because you can't see everything in real time. And so being independent gave artists a moment to be able to put out their material and be heard and be seen by, you know, just fans, just, you know, B2B, and didn't have to go through the gatekeepers, which is also an amazing way to be discovered. So, you know, as much as I love independence, I think there is a space for the gatekeeping as well. I think we have to find a balance between the two, because talent, creativity, nurturing of the talent, all of those things get watered down when artists don't get to go through the gatekeeping process. Or I don't like to say gatekeeping, but the process of, being on a label, taking that artist, teaching artists how to go out and speak in public, or teaching artists how to go out on a stage and perform in front of thousands and thousands of people, which they've probably never done before in their lives. So those things and that process is kind of missed along the way. But then you get these amazing artists that also get to sprout up, like a Drake, or we spoke about Justin Bieber, and these artists that came from being independent, and we probably would have never discovered them without it. So it's a give and take.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting now is some of these artists blow up much faster than they can be booked on tour, and some of their first performances are much, much bigger.
Absolutely. Quick story, when I first came out, to break in different regions, you had to go over to the UK, you had to go to Japan, you had to go to Brazil, Africa, all of these, amazing places, and touch the people. Now, if you put out a record and put it out online, it touches all of these regions before you do. And so a lot of these kids, they're big stars to these people before they even touch, the country or even touch the town. And so, that can be overwhelming for an artist when they've, basically only played like small venues, and then to go somewhere and to be revered as an artist of that magnitude, it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially when you haven't had any kind of artist training at all.
Do you interact with these younger artists who really went through that path, and what do those conversations sound like?
It's a hard conversation because they didn't have to go through my path. So it's kind of like, a new athlete talking to an older athlete and what they had to endure versus what the new athlete has to go through. It's just night and day, and so what I try to tell them is never lose sight of your creativity, because at the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to count the most. People don't, it's easy to promote and market something and make it look good, but if it doesn't sound good, if it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't have that thing that makes you gravitate towards it, then it probably won't last for 20, 25 years like a lot of artists in my era have been able to do. It's just a different time, but I think that the new artists of today, they have the gift of independence, and they have the gift of putting their music out and sharing it to the world freely. And that is something that I wish I had back then, because we could only do, a video at a time, a song at a time, and put it out as a single. Now artists can put out their whole project and chart with 20 songs off the album. It happens a lot nowadays. And so I envy some of the new technology and some of the new, ways that they have to promote and market and put their music out. But I also, kind of love the way we did it back then.
Yeah, not only is the gatekeepers changing in some ways, but also what happens after these artists break. We have a partnership with Anthony Edwards, or Ant Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who's very much an incredible character and player, and quickly becoming a face of the NBA. And we started working with Anthony in November, which is the beginning of the NBA season, and we were able to convince him and his team to allow us to build on YouTube, to build a show that if it was on Netflix, it would be the season after, but this was embedding cameras and following him. And part of that, real convincing him to do it was you build slower in some ways than getting a bigger deal at a bigger platform, but then you own that audience. And, when you see a Taylor Swift, or you see some of these other artists who actually really have that feedback loop by having a direct audience, and then you can actually sell them, more things that you're looking. And often the music is the best commercial, for a bigger business. Same with athletes and entertainers. To hone in on something that you both have touched, both on the artist side and the investment side, Pam mentioned a second ago that one of her investments in the last few years has been music libraries. And for artists, musicians had really difficult time getting a lot of their stuff back from the beginning. But when they do, this idea that they could, just like any other business, sell it on the go future value based on the financials that exist today. And in a world now where, music's being monetized on your Peloton, in your cab, anywhere and everywhere in a fractional way, but it's adding up quickly. So would love to hear, maybe Pam, start with you from an investment thesis. What did you see and what has the return profile been and did it go as expected?
Yeah, no, so I think firstly, I just underscore this whole gatekeeper concept and the kind of the changing and evolution of the gatekeepers, because that's what's caused the artists, and Jai, you have entrepreneur under your title, like under your picture, they've all become businesses, right? Because you can engage with your fan differently, and then as an investor, I get excited about that because that engagement leads to new business models, new growth, new monetization, et cetera. I think ultimately what I'm looking for are the things that today aren't yet securitized, but could be securitizable. And you see that now with the evolution of music. I think there's similar thing with creator economy, similar thing with other types of royalties in media content space. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is always looking for sources of return that are more diversifying, so less correlated to equity markets. So like if S&P 500 is down 20%, the amount of minutes, or for you, hours that someone is streaming your music every day, actually, interestingly, actually goes up, right? When people are upset, they'll actually listen to more music, so it's somewhat counter-cyclical.
Absolutely.
And so looking for those drivers, and like YouTube is similar, where you have watch time hours, right? Which, by the way, the amount of watch time hours, I think if you looked at the amount that gets uploaded to YouTube in any given 24-hour period, if you watched it nonstop, no sleeping, no eating, no blinking of your eyes, it was almost 85 years to watch it all in one 24-hour period. Now, granted, a lot of that is noise, but the volume is enormous. And so when I think about that, leads me to the last thing, which is the total addressable market and the growth tailwinds of this, right? And just thinking about it's not just the young people, it's everyone, right? My dad is on YouTube more than he's watching linear, which I think is crazy to me. He's 75.
Yeah, it's that searchability. Ja, what was, when you first heard that sophisticated investors were buying up libraries and artists would have a chance to monetize, what was sort of your first gut reaction? And then do you still feel the same way now that you did, when you saw this starting?
I think it's very interesting. I want to know what's the end game to it. I think it has something to do with AI and how they're going to be able to use a lot of these artist catalogs and feed it to AI algorithm, and have it spit out Bruce Springsteen songs or, Rolling Stones songs or Ja Rule songs. And so I think that's what it's mainly about. Am I kind of correct about that? Yeah, so, my catalog is very lucrative at this moment, which is a great thing. I think it's great for the artists to be able to have that. We work very hard, making these songs and not knowing the end game to that, and knowing that, you can go and, get, 8, 9 figures for your catalog nowadays is very impressive. And so, man, as much as things change, they remain the same, Brent. And I love artistry, and I love artists. I created my Icon platform for very much of the reasons why you see artists, doing independent things, because sometimes that gatekeeper, you can't get out your creative ideas. It's hard to get them shown. It's hard to get them heard. And so, I wanted to create my platform. So if I go to a YouTube or I go to a Netflix with an idea and they say, Ja, we don't love that idea, I can say, well, that's okay. I'm going to create it and it'll live here with me on Icon. And, sometimes they don't always get it. Cool story, my second album, when I made my second album, my label didn't like it. They hated it. And so for me, it was very much about being in the moment and where I had, the way I had grown creatively. This was the album for me to put out to the public, but not to them. And so, you know, I had a decision to make in that moment. Do I listen to the experts, the gatekeepers, and go make a new album? Or do I stand on what I believe in, my creativity, my artistry, and put this music out to the world because I feel like the world is ready for this particular sound? What do y'all think I did?
The latter.
Of course. and it turned out to be, you know, one of my most successful albums. And there was a shift. There was a culture shift, you know. That style, that sound of melodic rapping and you know, the music that I was using at the time became very, very popular, and people are still using that sound to this day. So what if I didn't do that? Or what if I would have listened to the gatekeepers at the moment? So, you know, for as much great advice that I did get from, you know, being a part of the machine, as I call it, sometimes the greatest advice you can have is your own intuition, you know, and your own creativity and your own gut to go with what you feel, you know?
Yep. Good point. I think going back to Pam's point, you know, with sort of people as brands, if you go back in time, you know, for some of us, there was 4 channels on television, really, you know, when we were, you know, young kids. And then in around 1980, it jumped up to about the first 20 cable channels that were the obvious ones, right? An ESPN, a CNN for news. And then quickly there were 100 and then 500 channels. And now with what Pam's dad and so many people are watching, there's endless channels on YouTube and other platforms. And it really is individuality. I think we're seeing this with athletes, where, you know, people are falling in love with the athlete, and then if they move from team to team, it's less consequential. But also the actual opportunity that extends out of this. Last week or the week before, Hailey Bieber had launched a 3 or 4-year-old brand called Rode that went, I think, for $1 billion. We worked with a creator named Mark Rober, who's a sophisticated former NASA engineer and Apple designer, and he got a massive following doing fun science pop stuff, and then he started his toy business and did, I think, 50 million in 50 days on a subscription model. So these become actual businesses that, whether they you know, wipe away a lot of the legacy businesses, these are because of what Ja said a minute ago about the fact that you have a global audience on these platforms right off the bat. So how do we, as, you know, consumers or investors, start to curate and figure out, you know, which of these trends are actually going to be where the brands and the investment and the communities and audience goes, Pam?
I mean, I think the first thing that I would say is the data. So that's the other thing, right? Because all of this is tech enabled. I'm a big math nerd, right? Like, so the analytics that you can run on the data, whether it's music space, YouTube space, like TV, like streaming, like you can look at all of it and actually discern where you want to be, right? And so whether you want to be in long form or short form, you want to be in scripted, unscripted, you want to be, and so you can use all the data science and all those tools to actually figure out where you want to be. And I think that's actually a very specific thing where the subgenres also perform differently. And so that analytical rigor is what drives a lot of how we play, right? Which is less, I don't have the originality, Ja, that you do to know that like a particular sound is gonna resonate with the audience.
Oh,
right?
I don't know either, trust me. I'm taking shots in the dark.
I'm gonna run the numbers, and that I think is what guides.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ja?
You know, creativity is creativity. Being creative is being creative. What was the question again?
Well, that's okay. I was going to ask you this one next. You know, what excites you about the world as you know it now, as a longtime artist?
Oh yeah.
And then what, you know, what sort of do you not like, or what takes us down maybe a path that doesn't have a great result?
Well, the thing that really excites me about what we are now is we used to live in what I call a push world, where everything was pushed and promoted to us. And now we live in a pull world, where everything we go when we pull. We go online. If I want this, particular shoe, or I want this particular, whatever, I can go and search it and find it for myself. I think that is the most intriguing thing about where we are right now. You don't have to promote to me. It's good to know about your product, but the end all be all is me going to find it and try it for myself. And I think artists, consumers, we all have that, the pleasure of doing that right now, thanks to, all of the new technology and the society that we live in. It's just a different moment that we're in right now,
And we were having a funny moment in the green room, like in the beginning, right, when YouTube or TikTok started putting out, people who wanted to be a musician or a comedian. I mean, it was rough, right? Like it was rough. Yeah. I mean, probably for real artists to watch, literally no gatekeeping, no quality. The production was bad, and over time we've really seen whether it be through the algorithm pushing higher level talent, and also the production getting more sophisticated. Now sophisticated YouTubers are hiring a camera person and a crew and editors. So you see this bridge world coming between the two worlds, and how does it work for, in your case, the labels, do both sides need each other, or is one going to win or lose the fight?
I think that falls on the artist. Where do you want to be as an artist? What do you want to be as an artist? If you're an independent artist, you can make money all day. There's plenty of artists that we may not be familiar with that sell out arenas. But if you want to be an artist that they deem a legacy artist, you kind of have to be a part of the machine, because now you want to radio spins. Now you want to be at the awards. You want to, get awards. And those things are reserved for the artists that are part of the system. And that's just the way it goes in music. I don't know how it works it kind of works that way in Hollywood too, entertainment as well, but I don't know how it works in sports. Sports is kind of the great common denominator. I love it because you can't hide in sports. That's what I love about sports, is either you're good or you're not, and in music you can kind of get away with not being the best sometimes.
In sports now, it goes down to the NIL, and these athletes are staying in college longer. They're making a lot of money in college, and they're being rewarded for personality versus, just the very binary. Are you going to score more points than that woman or man next to you? I'm curious, Pam, from your perspective, what are you most excited about this world as an investor?
What I'm most excited about this world, and it's one of the many themes that we invest in, so it's definitely the most fun of all the themes that I invest behind. So that's one. But I think, secondly, is actually just being so close to that creativity and originality that drives content that persists, right? That's something that I'm personally excited about. I think that then resonates with the audience, which then I'm economically excited about, right? Because then that person is going to build a community, engagement, following, and a business, and a business that can scale for the long run.
All right, we'll wrap it up here in a second. AI is, it's already, in the same way I think YouTube allowed anybody that wanted to make any piece of content, make it and put it out in the world. With AI now, we're gonna be able to do that with premium content, right? I've already, been inside so many rooms watching and seeing, stuff that people would assume were real people that were amalgamations and created. What do you, from your side of the fence, think? Will kids hear catchy, fun tunes that are AI and not care whether or not there's an actual artist that can perform at a stage in real life for them to go see?
I think we are going to see some of that. You know, me being an older consumer myself, there's so much music out there, so much content. Sometimes I don't know who the artist is. I like a song, don't know what they look like, you know, and I'm kind of fine with that, you know, not thinking of it could be AI, because then I'm not fine with that, if that makes sense, you know. So it's like, I'm already there, and a lot of us are already there when we're listening to songs and music that we like and don't know who sings it or doesn't know the artist behind it. So I think a lot of us are already there subconsciously. But I think for us to get there mentally and knowing that this is an AI artist, I think that's going to take some time. And Timbaland just did something. He signed a AI artist. I don't even know what that means. like how do you sign an AI artist? Can they say no to the deal? I don't know. But
it was on my list. We didn't get to it. He's building a studio of AI artists.
Yes, and he's getting a lot of backlash for it, because real artists are like, these are opportunities that a real artist could have. You're a big time producer, and we would love to get beats from Timbaland, and you're giving them to a robot, you know. And so it's going to be one of those situations where I think the future is near, and it's going to happen, and it's inevitable, but it's going to take a little bit of time for people to actually wrap their mind around what they're already doing.
Well, in Hollywood, the unions have tried to kind of do what they could to block this, but it's so far ahead now because Hollywood's not the only sophisticated, studio system in the world. Some of the greatest stuff's coming out of South Korea. And
but see, in Hollywood, how does that work, Brent?
So I think they'll use AI quickly to get rid of all extras. I think if Tom Cruise signs a piece of paper,
now.
He'll do it.
They've been doing that.
But you could make movies with the actor or actress you want after they're long gone, right? All right, Pam, bring us home.
Okay.
Where do you see? You said data. How are you seeing right now AI potentially having maybe a first or second big imprint on the creator economy? I assume a lot of it's already happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot has happened, but a lot to come. I think that I believe in the human in the loop, so I don't think the artist is going to get kind of sidelined. I think it's just going to amplify. It's also going to help kind of isolate those activities that, frankly, we're taking a lot of bandwidth, but then now the artists can actually focus on the things that are even more value add, right, as part of their process. So as I think about it, I'm really excited about it, but I think the human is still there. Thank God, right, for all of us. But that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Pam, thank you very much. Rule, thank you very much. Thank you all.
Brent, thank you.